The space station was quiet, its steel walls echoing with the hum of the engines. Captain Eric Hawk stood in front of the observation window, staring out at the distant stars. His crew was busy preparing for the raid, but Eric had never been a fan of the bloodshed. It wasn't that he didn't believe in the cause, it was just that over time the endless battles had started to wear on him. War had a way of draining the soul. Today, they weren't just attacking any target. They were hitting a supply depot on the Sci-Fi homeworld. The Sci-Fi were ruthless, fierce, and completely alien in their ways. The humans in Sci-Fi had been at war for years. They had no mercy for each other. But today's mission felt different. To Eric, he couldn't shake the feeling that something would go wrong. "Captain," a voice interrupted his thoughts. Lieutenant Mara Jennings stepped into the room, her face serious. She was young, but she had quickly earned Eric's trust. "Everything's set for the mission. You ready?" Eric turned to face her. "As ready as I'll ever be." The mission began smoothly. The human fleet descended upon the Sci-Fi depot, cutting through their defenses with precision. Eric led his team through the enemy base, moving quickly to secure the supplies and make their escape. The whole operation was a well-practiced dance, each step calculated and practiced. But then something unexpected happened. In the middle of the raid, a small group of Sci-Fi soldiers appeared from a hidden corridor. They were faster than Eric had anticipated, and the team was forced to fall back into the shadows. The battle had turned against them. As they retreated, Eric noticed something that made his heart stop. Among the chaos, a Sci-Fi child was left behind. She was small, older than 8, her eyes wide with fear as she watched the soldiers disappear into the smoke of the battle. Eric hesitated. His training told him to leave her. The Sci-Fi were the enemy. They were dangerous. But as he watched her, something inside him snapped. The child was alone. She was scared. And he couldn't just leave her there to die. "Captain," Mara shouted, dragging him back toward the ship. "We have to go. It's too risky." But Eric was already moving toward the child. He quickly made his decision. He couldn't leave her behind. His mind raced as he ran toward the girl, scooping her up into his arms before retreating back into the shadows. Mara's voice echoed through his earpiece. "Captain, we're under attack. The Sci-Fi are regrouping. What are you doing? We need to go now." Ignoring her calls, Eric sprinted back toward the ship, the small alien girl tightly held in his arms. The soldiers were closing in, but Eric didn't care. The girl's life was more important than any mission, than any order. When they finally made it back to the Valiant, the crew was in shock. No one expected Eric to bring back a prisoner, especially not a child. Commander Victor Wells, the second in command, was furious. "Are you out of your mind, Eric?" he barked as Eric entered the command room. "You're bringing an enemy child aboard? Do you know what this could mean?" "I couldn't leave her there," Eric said, his voice steady but firm. "She's just a kid. She's not part of this war." Victor scowled. "You're going to get us all killed, Eric. The Sci-Fi won't take this lightly." Eric looked down at the girl in his arms. She was trembling, but her large eyes were filled with curiosity. She had no idea what was going on. She was just a child caught in the middle of a war she didn't understand. "We can't just throw her out into the void," Eric said quietly, his gaze still on the girl. "We need to find a way to protect her." As the Valiant took off from the Sci-Fi world, the crew prepared for the long journey home. But Eric knew that the hardest part was just beginning. He couldn't shake the image of the girl's face, so full of fear and confusion. Back in the crew quarters, Eric placed the child on a bench. She looked up at him, her eyes still wide. But there was something else in them now. Trust. She didn't speak, not yet, but she had no one else. Eric ran, a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the situation settle on his shoulders. He had just put his entire crew in danger by protecting the child. He had broken orders. He had done something that could cost them everything, but he couldn't regret it. The girl didn't deserve to die because of a war she hadn't chosen. "Do you have a name?" Eric asked her softly, kneeling down to her level. The child blinked at him, her tiny hands clutching the edge of the bench. She said nothing at first, but then she whispered, "Lyra." Eric smiled gently. "Lyra, you're safe now." As the days passed, Lyra began to show signs of adapting to her new environment. She was still silent most of the time, but she seemed to understand when the crew spoke to her. Eric spent time with her when he could, trying to teach her basic words and gestures. Despite the danger she brought with her, Eric couldn't help but feel protective of her. The bond between them was growing, slowly but surely. She was a reminder that even in the darkest moments of war, there were still lives to protect. But the peace they had found would not last forever. The Scifi were relentless, and sooner or later Queen Ziraxa, the leader of the Scifi, would come for her daughter. Eric knew it was only a matter of time before the real battle began. The stars outside the Valiant's observation window streaked past as the ship sped through the vastness of space. Captain Eric Hawk paced back and forth in the command room, his mind racing. The child Lyra sat quietly in the corner, her wide eyes taking in everything, though she never spoke much. She had quickly grown attached to him, and Eric couldn't help but feel protective of her. "We're leaving Sci-Fi space," Commander Victor Wells said, entering the room. His tone was grim. "But we're not out of danger yet." Eric looked out the window. The Sci-Fi were relentless. They didn't forgive mistakes. "I know. We need to stay sharp." Victor crossed his arms, his gaze fixed on the child. "What do you plan to do with her, Erica? You've made your choice, but we can't keep her forever." "I'm not planning on keeping her forever," Eric replied. "But I'm not leaving her behind. Not after what happened. She's innocent in all of this." Victor sighed. "You're risking the lives of everyone on this ship for a child who's a member of the enemy species." "She's not the enemy," Eric said firmly. "She's just a kid." Victor didn't respond. He didn't need to. The tension in the room was enough. The crew was divided. Some agreed with Eric, while others were more practical, fearing that harboring a Scifi child would make them all targets. As the Valiant traveled deeper into space, Eric couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted. The Scifi were a powerful race, and their queen, Ziraxa, was known for her cruelty. There was no doubt in Eric's mind that Ziraxa would stop at nothing to get her daughter back. Lyra hadn't said much since their escape. She was silent, most of the time only occasionally looking up at Eric with a quiet trust in her eyes. She had no understanding of the danger they were in, but Eric understood it all too well. Days passed, and the crew kept watch. The sensors aboard the Valiant had been fine-tuned to detect any incoming ships, but so far, they hadn't picked up anything unusual. They were safe, for now. Then, one morning, the alarm rang out through the ship. The crew jumped into action, rushing to their stations as the sound of sirens echoed through the hallways. "Report!" Eric shouted as he entered the command room. Victor was already at the console. His face was pale. "There's a Scifi fleet on our tail. They're coming fast. They must have picked up our trail." Eric's heart sank. He had known it was only a matter of time. He turned to the crew. "Brace for impact. Get the shields up. We're not going down without a fight." The Valiant went into evasive maneuvers, dodging the Scifi ships that appeared on their radar. The Scifi ships were sleek, designed for speed and power, their dark shapes closing in on the human vessel. Eric's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. The Scifi fleet wasn't here to negotiate. They were here for revenge. "Captain?" Mara's voice crackled through the communication system. "They're locking onto us. We won't be able to escape with our shields down. We need to fight back." Eric glanced at the control panel. The Valiant's weapon systems were primed, but they weren't nearly as powerful as the Scifi's. It wasn't a fair fight. "What about Lyra?" Victor asked, his voice filled with concern. "What do we do with her?" "We keep her safe," Eric said. "She's not involved in this. I'll get her to the secure quarters. Mara, Victor, you're with me. We're not going down without a fight." Eric made his way to the lower decks where Lyra was sitting in a small room, drawing strange symbols on the floor with chalk. She looked up as Eric entered, her eyes full of curiosity. "We have to go to a safer place, Lyra," Eric said, kneeling beside her. Stay close to me, all right? Lyra didn't speak, but she nodded. Eric gently picked her up, carrying her toward the ship's secure area. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew he had to keep her safe. As they made their way through the ship, explosions rattled the walls and the sound of laser fire filled the air. The Valiant was under attack and the crew was fighting to keep the ship intact. Back in the command room, Victor and Mara were doing everything they could to fight back against the Sci-Fi ships. But the odds were against them. The Valiant was fast, but it couldn't outrun the Sci-Fi fleet forever. "They're getting closer," Mara shouted as she fired the ship's weapons. "We can't keep this up much longer." Eric's mind raced. He needed a way to buy them time. He turned to Victor. "Can you—" The Valiant lurched forward as the engines hummed. Eric Hawk stood in the command room, his eyes fixed on the stars outside. His mind, however, was far from the peaceful expanse of space. He couldn't stop thinking about the Sci-Fi fleet, now just a few light years behind them. But for the moment they were safe. At least for now. "Captain." Victor Wells's voice broke through the silence. "We've entered Foster's orbit. The asteroid belt is in range. We can hide here until the Sci-Fi give up." Eric nodded, but didn't speak. He wasn't sure hiding was the right choice. The longer they stayed in one place, the more predictable they became. The Sci-Fi could track them down eventually. "Let's keep moving," Eric ordered. "Plot a course through the belt. We need to stay on the move." Victor worked quickly, inputting the coordinates. The asteroid belt was a natural hiding place, but it was also a dangerous one. The large rocks moved at unpredictable speeds. A wrong turn could lead to disaster. While the ship moved through the dense field of asteroids, Eric went to check on Lyra. The child had been quiet for the last few hours, staying in the secure room where Eric had placed her for safety. She wasn't scared, not like she had been when they first brought her aboard. But there was a certain sadness in her eyes now. She knew they were running, but she didn't understand why. Eric sat down next to her. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently. Lyra didn't respond right away. She just looked up at him, her small hands clasped tightly in her lap. Then very slowly she pointed to a small piece of paper that lay beside her, something she had been scribbling on earlier. Eric picked it up. It was a drawing, simple but powerful. It was of a woman. The woman had sharp features, long hair, and a crown on her head. Eric recognized the woman at once. It was Queen Ziraxa, the Sci-Fi queen. The realization hit him like a punch. Lyra didn't just know about the Sci-Fi, she knew her mother. This wasn't just any child. Lyra was the queen's daughter. Eric swallowed hard. He had suspected as much, but seeing it drawn out in front of him made it real. He had protected the child of the enemy's queen, the one person who could tear their lives apart if she ever found out. "What is this?" Eric asked, pointing to the drawing. Lyra's small voice was barely a whisper. "My mother." Eric's heart sank. He hadn't realized how close they had come to the heart of the enemy. "Your mother is the queen of the Sci-Fi?" he asked gently. Lyra nodded, her big eyes full of uncertainty. "I didn't know," Eric said, trying to make her understand. "But that doesn't change anything. You're safe with us now." Lyra didn't respond. She simply stared down at the floor, tracing a finger over the paper. Eric sat with her for a moment, his mind racing. The queen's fury would be unimaginable. She had no reason to spare him now. The moment she learned that her daughter was alive, there would be no mercy. Meanwhile, in the command room, Mara Jennings was monitoring the ship's systems. The sensors had picked up a faint signal, something odd among the drifting asteroids. She leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Captain, you might want to take a look at this," she called over the intercom. Eric stood up and headed to the command room. "What's going on?" Mara's fingers flew over the console. "There's an anomaly ahead. It looks like some sort of structure. It's buried in the asteroid field. We can't get a clear scan, but it might be worth checking out." Eric hesitated. They were already in a precarious position, trying to hide from the Sci-Fi fleet. But curiosity tugged at him. This could be a chance, a place to hide, or maybe even something that could help them survive. Plot a course for it, Eric ordered. We'll check it out. The ship carefully navigated through the dense asteroid field. Every minute felt like an eternity as they slowly approached the anomaly. The ship's sensors were struggling to get a clear reading, but Eric could feel the weight of the moment. This was their chance. If they were lucky, they might find something that could help them fight back against the Sci-Fi. As they neared the anomaly, the shape of a large object began to appear on the display. It was an old structure buried deep within the asteroid. It had the look of something ancient, as if it had been there for centuries, hidden from prying eyes. Get us closer, Eric ordered. We need to know what this is. The ship's engines whined as it inched forward. Soon they were within, range to send a team down to investigate. Prepare an away team, Eric said. Victor, Mara, you're with me. Let's see what we're dealing with. Minutes later, the team was suited up in their space gear and standing in the airlock. Eric led the way, the others close behind him as they stepped onto the surface of the asteroid. The structure was massive, an ancient vault, covered in strange markings that none of them could recognize. This doesn't look like any Sci-Fi tech, Mara said, her voice muffled through her helmet. Eric nodded. No, it doesn't. This could be something else entirely. They made their way to the entrance of the vault. It was sealed, but there was a strange energy about it, something that pulsed beneath the surface. Victor scanned the entrance, frowning. I'm detecting a weak energy signature, he said. It's almost like a door, but it's locked. Eric's heart raced. Could this be a hidden weapon? A secret from a long-forgotten civilization? He didn't know, but he couldn't afford to ignore it. This could be their key to surviving the coming battle. We're opening it, Eric said firmly. Let's see what's inside. As they worked to open the vault, Lyra's image kept appearing in Eric's mind. The stakes had changed. He wasn't just protecting a child now. He was protecting the future of humanity. If this vault held something that could help them, it might be their only hope. But Eric knew one thing for certain. No matter what lay ahead, he couldn't let Lyra down. Not now. This part continues to build tension and mystery, with the discovery of the hidden vault offering potential answers or tools that could aid the crew in their fight. It also deepens the relationship between Eric and Lyra, as Eric grapples with the weight of his responsibility. The vault door groaned as Eric and the team finally managed to unlock it. Victor Wells was the first to step forward, carefully pushing the heavy door open. Beyond it lay a dimly lit corridor, lined with strange symbols and unfamiliar technology. The air was cool and musty, as though this place had been sealed for centuries. Looks like no one's been here for a long time, Mara Jennings commented, her voice echoing in her helmet as she scanned the surroundings. What do you think this place is? I'm not sure, Eric replied, his voice low, but it might be exactly what we need to survive. They moved cautiously into the corridor. The walls were smooth, made from a material that neither Eric nor Mara recognized. The air felt different here, strange, like it carried an energy that was both ancient and powerful. Victor's scanning equipment beeped, indicating that the structure had some form of power, though it was weak. He adjusted the settings on his console. There's still some kind of energy coming from deeper inside. Let's keep moving. Eric led the way, his thoughts drifting to Lyra. The child was safe for now, but that safety wouldn't last long if the Sci-Fi found them. Queen Zaraxa wouldn't stop hunting her daughter. She would bring everything she had. As the team moved deeper into the vault, the walls began to change. The strange symbols that lined the corridor grew more complex, almost as if they were trying to communicate something. The deeper they went, the stronger the sense of energy became. It was like the vault was alive, humming with power. After several more turns, they reached a large chamber. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, on which rested a glowing orb. The orb pulsed with a light that was both bright and soft, filling the room with a calming, almost hypnotic glow. Is this it? Mara asked, stepping forward cautiously. Eric didn't answer immediately. He was staring at the orb, a deep sense of unease rising in him. It looked like it could be a weapon, but the energy it gave off wasn't destructive. It felt like it was Waiting. I think it is, Eric finally said. Whatever this is, it might be our key to fighting back. Suddenly, there was a low rumble from deep within the vault. The ground beneath them shook and a loud mechanical sound filled the air. It was as if the vault was coming to life. Get ready, Eric ordered. We might not be alone. Outside, the Valiant continued to drift through the asteroid belt. The ship's crew was on edge. There had been no sign of the Sci-Fi fleet since they entered Foster's orbit, but the danger was always present. Captain Eric Hawk had left them with strict orders to remain hidden. On the bridge, Mara stood by the sensor console watching the display. Suddenly, a new reading appeared, one that made her heart race. Captain, she said over the comms, her voice tight with urgency. We've got Sci-Fi ships coming in fast. They're closing in on our location. Back in the vault, Eric and the team were surrounded by an eerie silence. The rumbling had stopped, but something had changed. The glowing orb on the pedestal was now pulsing faster, brighter, almost as if it were alive. We need to figure out what this thing is, Eric said. He moved toward the pedestal, reaching out to touch the orb. As his fingers brushed against its surface, a wave of energy surged through him. He gasped, stumbling back. The light from the orb flared briefly, then faded. What was that? Mara asked, stepping forward to help him steady himself. I don't know, Eric said, his voice strained. But whatever this is, it's powerful. We can't let the Sci-Fi... The vault was silent now, except for the low hum of the ancient machinery deep inside. Queen Ziraxa stood before Eric, her eyes burning with a cold fury that sent a shiver down his spine. Behind her, her soldiers stood in the shadows, waiting for her command. Eric, however, didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. You've made a mistake, human, Ziraxa said, her voice low but filled with authority. You think you can steal my daughter and walk away unscathed? Eric stood, his ground, feeling the weight of the situation pressing on him. He had no weapon in his hand, only words. But right now, words were his only hope. I didn't steal her, Eric replied, his voice steady. I protected her. You were willing to sacrifice her for your war. I won't let that happen. Ziraxa's eyes narrowed, her gaze sharp as a blade. You dare lecture me on sacrifice? You are the invader here, the one who took what is mine. I didn't take her. I gave her a chance, Eric countered. A chance to live outside this endless war. There was a long pause as Ziraxa studied him, her lips curling into a tight smile. You are brave, human. I will give you that. But bravery alone will not save you. Eric didn't back down. I'm not trying to save myself, I'm trying to save her. Lyra's name echoed in his mind. The little girl who had been nothing but a pawn in a war she didn't ask for. She deserved a future beyond the bloodshed and hatred of the Sci-Fi Empire. Ziraxa took a step forward, closing the distance between them. Her towering presence loomed over him, but Eric didn't waver. He had made his choice. I could kill you right now, human. Take back my daughter and end this war, she said, her voice a dangerous whisper. But you've done something no one else has done. You've shown me a glimpse of what could be. Something more than this endless cycle of destruction. Eric's heart raced, but he kept his expression calm. You're not a monster, Ziraxa. You've been fighting for your people, but there has to be another way. Ziraxa's eyes softened for the briefest moment, and for the first time, Eric saw the weariness behind her fierce facade. She was a mother, not just a queen. The weight of her role had clearly taken its toll. You think I haven't considered peace? Ziraxa said quietly, almost to herself. But there is no peace for my people. The universe will not forgive us for what we have done. I don't think the universe can forgive anyone until we stop fighting, Eric replied. If you want to change your future and Lyra's future, you have to start somewhere. You can't change everything in one day, but you can start with one decision. Ziraxa stepped back, her eyes still fixed on Eric. There was a tension in the air now, a stillness that made him wonder if she was considering his words. But the moment was short-lived, as a low rumble shook the vault. The ground beneath their feet vibrated, and the distant sound of explosions echoed through the corridors. Eric's eyes snapped toward the door. What's happening? Zaraxa's face darkened. My people are here. The rogues, they're attacking. Eric's heart skipped a beat. He had hoped for a brief window of peace, but now it seemed the Sci-Fi Empire's inner conflict was about to explode. We need to leave, now. Zaraxa barked, turning toward her soldiers. Take position. We cannot let them take this vault. Eric's mind raced. If the rogue faction of the Sci-Fi managed to breach the vault, everything they had fought for would be lost. The orb, the technology inside, Lyra's future, all of it could be destroyed in an instant. Let's go, Eric said, grabbing Mara and Victor by the arm. We need to protect Lyra. Outside the vault, the battle had already begun. The rogue Sci-Fi forces were closing in fast, their ships firing on the Valiant as they tried to break through the defenses. Inside the vault, the walls were shaking with every blast that rang out. We're running out of time, Victor said, looking at Eric with urgency. We need to get out of here before they breach the vault. We can't leave without Lyra, Eric replied, his mind set. She's still in the safe room. We can't let them take her. Back on the Valiant, Mara Jennings was frantically working at the sensor station, watching as the rogue Sci-Fi ships closed in on their position. The comms were jammed, and there was no way to contact Eric and his team. We're surrounded, Mara muttered, her hands flying over the controls. They've got us cornered. Do we have a way out? Victor's voice crackled over the intercom. Mara shook her head. No clear path. We're stuck in this asteroid field with no way to escape. Victor's voice came through again, this time with more determination. We're going to get them out. Prepare for a counterattack. Mara nodded, rallying the crew. Prepare the weapons. We fight to get them back. Inside the vault, Eric and his team rushed toward the safe room where Lyra was hiding. The sound of the explosions grew louder with each passing second. As they reached the door, Eric's heart raced. He had to get to her before it was too late. But when the door slid open, it wasn't Lyra who met them. Instead, a Sci-Fi soldier stood in the doorway, holding a blaster aimed directly at Eric. The soldier's armor was different from the typical Sci-Fi forces. This was a rogue faction member, a traitor to Zaraxa's cause. You will not take her from us, human, the soldier sneered. You will die for what you've done. Eric's pulse quickened. This was it. They had no choice now. He raised his own weapon, and just as the soldier fired, Mara's voice came through the comms. Incoming. Hold on, Eric. We're on our way. In that moment, everything happened at once. The rogue soldier fired his blaster, but Eric ducked, the blast missing him by inches. He returned fire, taking the soldier down in a single shot. The tension was thick in the air, and time seemed to stretch. But it wasn't over. The rogue forces were closing in, and Eric knew they didn't have much time. We need to go now, Eric shouted, pulling Lyra out of the safe room. The child looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes. The battle outside the vault was chaos. The rogue Sci-Fi forces had breached the asteroid belt, and their ships rained fire upon the Valiant. Inside the vault, Eric Hawke and his team fought desperately to protect Lyra, the young Sci-Fi princess who had unknowingly become the center of this war. Their escape was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Eric would never let her go without a fight. We can't stay here much longer, Victor Wells said, his voice urgent as he scanned the hallway. The walls shook with the force of explosions, and the sound of blaster fire echoed through the chamber. We need a way out now. Eric nodded grimly, his eyes searching the darkened corridor for a solution. The rogue forces were relentless, and the Valiant couldn't hold out forever. They needed to move fast, but they also had to protect Lyra. Mara, do you have any updates on the ship? Eric asked, trying to reach his second-in-command over the comms. We're trying to hold them off, Captain, but it's not looking good. Mara's voice crackled through the comm. The rogue Sci-Fi are closing in fast, and we don't have much time. Eric's mind raced. He couldn't waste another second. If they didn't leave now, they would all be trapped. We're coming to you. Hold the line, he ordered, rallying his team to move. Outside, the Valiant's crew was doing everything they could to keep the ship intact. Mara stood at the sensor console, her hands shaking as the rogue Sci-Fi forces battered their defenses. The ship was taking damage, but it was still holding together. For now. "We're almost there, Mara. Hang on." Victor's voice echoed, over the comms. "We've secured Lyra. We're heading to the airlock." Mara looked at the status screen in front of her, her heart pounding. There was a narrow gap in the asteroid field just a few kilometers away. If they could reach it, they might be able to escape. But the rogue Sci-Fi ships were closing in, and every second they spent in this field made them more vulnerable. "Mara, we're almost there. Get us ready to launch." Eric's voice cut through the static, calm and determined. Mara's fingers flew across the controls. "Preparing for launch. Get to the airlock now." Back in the vault, Eric and his team sprinted toward the exit. The sound of blaster fire grew louder as they neared the doors. The rogue Sci-Fi soldiers had spread out and they were closing in fast, but Eric wasn't about to let them take Lyra. As they approached the airlock, the doors slid open, revealing the waiting Valiant crew. The ship's hull was still holding strong, but it was clear that the clock was ticking. They had to move quickly. "We're almost there, Lyra," Eric said softly, glancing down at the girl in his arms. She was still quiet, but her eyes were filled with trust. She had been through so much already. Eric couldn't bear the thought of letting her down. The team rushed into the airlock and the doors closed behind them with a hiss. For a moment, it seemed like everything had frozen. The sound of the explosions outside, the pounding of their hearts. It all faded away. "Captain." Mara's voice came through the comm, a note of panic in her voice. "They're right on our tail. We don't have much time. Ready the ship, Mara. We're launching now." Eric barked, grabbing onto the control panel. They had no choice but to break free. Victor ran to the cockpit and began preparing the ship for launch. "Hold on tight." In the heart of the battle, the Valiant powered up its engines and shot out of the asteroid field. The rogue Sci-Fi ships followed in pursuit, their weapons firing relentlessly. The crew was on edge, but Eric's focus remained on Lyra. They couldn't afford to lose her. "We've got to shake them off," Victor shouted, pushing the ship's engines to their limits. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." Mara held tight to the console as T